Hey, Mighty Warrior, welcome. I'm Dr. Joe Martin, the founder and creator of Real Men Connect Ministries and the host of the Real Men Connect podcast, which is the #1 rated podcast on iTunes for Christian men. And thanks for joining me today. Let me ask you a question. What if I could show you how to have a closer walk with God, spiritually lead your wife and family, strengthen your marriage, succeed at work, manage your time, money, and life better, and easily handle tough times without giving in to addictions, bad habits, hurts, and hang-ups? Guaranteed. Would it be worth 30 minutes of your time? Today I'm going to show you the 5 critical things that every man needs in order to win in life as a godly husband, father, and leader, regardless of where he's starting spiritually, whether he's a brand new believer or a seasoned saint. I'm guessing that if you're watching or listening to this video presentation and you're a man, you're probably struggling or frustrated in one of these 7 areas: marriage, money, raising children, work, sexual purity, finding purpose, or walking with God. But before you beat yourself up over it, I want you to know that it's not your fault. There's a lot to learn when it comes to being a godly husband, father, and spiritual leader. And you can't expect to succeed at anything, including being a man, if you've never been taught how. When I speak at men's conferences across the country, I often tell them that when I was a school teacher and university professor, we often diagnosed students with learning disabilities as being ADD, ADHD, or any other letter of the alphabet. But I think when it comes to men, we also have a learning disability that hasn't been diagnosed. And that learning disability is ABT, ain't been taught. Now that usually gets a laugh from the men in the audience. But seriously, how can you expect to succeed at anything if you've never been taught how to do it? And unfortunately, most men are doing life by trial and error. And although I hate to say it, but our wives, children, family, and friends are all guinea pigs in our manhood experiment. Ouch. Now, for most men, when it comes to our fathers, either we weren't taught by our fathers, we were taught the wrong way by our fathers, or if you were fortunate enough to have a great dad, you probably weren't paying attention when you were being taught. Either way, your challenge isn't a want-to issue, it's more of a how-to problem. For me, I was in category 1. I wasn't taught. My dad was not in the home when I was growing up. And as a result of me being ABT, ain't been taught, I ruined a 16-year marriage and 20-year friendship with my first wife, wrecking my family and almost destroying my life because I fell victim to porn, work, money, lust, and women. So if you're concerned or believe it's too late for you, or you think you've done too much damage, or even if you think you don't know enough, I want to put your fears to rest. It's not too late. You can do this. You just need a little help, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll believe that my team and I are the right people to help you. Like I said earlier, the problem for most of us is we started with the wrong foundation, which goes back to how we were parented by our fathers. And based on the number of men I meet, coach, mentor, and disciple, I've come to realize that every man had either one of 5 types of dads. And to make this easy to understand, I'll use military terms to explain. Either your dad was an active duty dad, which is a dad who was present and engaged. Even if he didn't live in the home with you, he trained you to be a man. Or he was a reservist dad, which means he started or stopped being a dad once you got to a certain age and not much man training took place. Or he could have been an AWOL dad. In other words, he was absent without leave. He may have been present physically, but he was emotionally and spiritually absent. And very little man training, if any, took place. Or maybe he was a MIA dad, missing in action dad. He was never there and you never knew him, so he couldn't train you to be a man. Or he was a POW dad. In other words, a prisoner of war dad. Yeah, you knew him, but he seemed to be angry all the time and never happy or satisfied with your performance. And any man training he probably provided you probably was the wrong type of training. Now do you see why you shouldn't beat yourself up over your struggles as a man? God never intended for the fathers in our lives to be AWOL, MIA, POWs, or even reservists. God meant for us to be active duty dads, husbands, and spiritual leaders. Now I know it seems like I'm beating up on our fathers, but I'm really not. If anything, I'm trying to explain to you why you're struggling as a man. Yes, our dads may explain us, but it doesn't excuse us of the responsibility of becoming better husbands, father, and spiritual leaders. And that's what I'm here to help you do. I'm here to help you break the generational curses that has plagued our families for far too long. The truth of the matter is, men want to win. And I know you're no different. You want to be a champion. Now, maybe not a world champion of a sport, but a champion husband, champion father, champion leader, and even a champion Christian. You want to win. And I want to show you how to win, guaranteed. So please don't beat yourself up and don't beat up your dads either. Because guess what? Your dad's father probably wasn't much better than your dad. My point is this: when it comes to being a man, we're all in need of God's grace and mercy and forgiveness, including our dads. As for the goal of this presentation, if you're a believer, new or old, and you find yourself suffering or struggling, whether as a husband, single man, father, or spiritual leader, I'm going to show you how to get unstuck and get back on track where God wants you to be. And if you're a believer, whether new or old, and you're somewhat satisfied with where you are right now as a husband, single man, father, or spiritual leader, but you're striving to be an even better and stronger man of God, I'm going to show you how to win easier and faster than you ever could imagine. And here's the secret. Over the last 5 years I've been working with men in ministry, I found out that there are 5 things every Christian man needs in order to succeed and win in the battles he faces every day. In other words, show me a man who's weak in any of these 5 areas, and I can almost guarantee you he's spiritually struggling, either with his walk with God, in his marriage, with his children, in his finances, at work or in business, with sexual purity, or handling tough times. And likewise, if you show me a man who's winning in life, in spite of his struggles, because we all struggle, I can almost guarantee you he's winning because he's strong in all 5 of these areas. I have yet to see an exception to this in men's ministry. So my goal is to show you how critical all 5 of these areas are to your overall success as a man and how I can help you. As I mentioned earlier, I went from being addicted to porn and a serial adulterer who ruined a 16-year marriage, wrecked my family, wasted my wealth, risked my health, and almost destroyed my life, to now being happily remarried with a wonderful family, running a full-time men's ministry, speaking to, mentoring, coaching, and discipling men all over the country, and now hosting the #1 radio podcast on iTunes for Christian men. And to top it off, I've been porn-free, masturbation-free, and lust-free for the past 13 and a half years with no relapses. Can you say praise God? God took me from rags to riches to ruin to redemption. And it's all because I followed a simple 5-tier plan that I'm about to show you right now. See, I grew up in abject poverty in one of the toughest inner city ghettos in Miami, Florida, in a place called Liberty City. My mom was only 16 years old when she had me, and my dad left her when I was only 2 years old, and my younger sister was only 1. I grew up basically with no men in the home, and the only ones I knew were the ones I saw in the streets. And the only man who lived with us briefly sexually abused me as a child for 3 years. So not only did I not have a man to teach me how to be a man, because of the abuse I suffered, I was afraid to even ask another man for help. The only men I saw growing up as a kid were either criminals, abusers, drug users, gangbangers, or womanizers. I wanted answers and I needed answers, but I didn't know where to go for answers. Even though I survived my horrific childhood by going to college, earning several degrees, getting a great job, starting a business, making a lot of money, getting married and starting my own family, I still didn't know how to be a man. I was still ABT, ain't been taught. So like most men, I tried to succeed through trial and error. But the problem was I was trying to hide my past, my pain, and my shame. And hiding my past was like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. And eventually my childhood issues popped up again years later. And it ended up pushing me underwater, almost drowning me. And after losing my wife, my money, and almost my life, I hit rock bottom. Only to discover that God was the rock at the bottom. I realized then that I could never be the man God called and created me to be by myself. I needed help. Specifically, I needed the help of other men, other godly men. I learned 2 valuable lessons the hard way. 1, that it's impossible for a good man to become a great man without the help of a godly man. And 2, a man is only as strong as the number of stronger men he has in his life. The only problem is these kind of men are hard to find, and they don't usually find you. You have to find them. So that's what I did. I started intentionally recruiting godly men to help me become a better man. I know that your childhood probably wasn't as traumatic as mine was. Who knows, maybe it was worse. But I like what Pastor Steve Furtick once said about men. He said, we may come from different situations, but we all have the same struggles. What I'm about to share with you doesn't just work for black men like me who grew up in the ghetto, being sexually abused, abandoned by their fathers, neglected by their moms, or being a victim and a witness to crime and violence. No, this 5-tier plan works for any man who's ever experienced or struggled with anger, fear, hurt, loss, failure, frustration, rejection, loneliness, insecurity, or even confusion when it comes to being a man. And although I'm not a gambling man, I think it's a safe bet to say this describes you too. Remember, this isn't about your specific circumstances. It's about your lack of training as a man, as a husband, as a father, and as a spiritual leader. And I'm here to help you. Not only has this 5-tier plan been a blessing to me, but it's been a blessing to others. Here's a testimony from one of my brothers and Real Men 300 members, AOFM. Look at what he had to say. He says, Joe's ministry and this brotherhood of men have been such a blessing to me. Personally, Joe was there for me during a very challenging season in my life. With his help and his counsel, he got me to focus on Christ, not just my circumstances. This type of brotherhood is something I believe all men need to ensure that they're being revitalized and encouraged on a regular basis in their Christian walk. So now I want to use the rest of our time together to explain to you the 5 critical things every man needs in order to win, guaranteed, and why each is so important to your success as a man of God. And those 5 critical things are Christ, community, connection, coaching, and counseling. The first need is the most important part of the plan, and it's the foundation for everything else, and that's Christ. Specifically, I'm talking about your relationship with Christ. As a Christian man, it should be the most important relationship in your life. The problem is, most of us don't treat it like it's the most important relationship, but rather like an inconvenient but necessary relationship. I can prove it because the best way to gauge any relationship is look at how much time you invest in it. So when I work with men, I want to know, how often do you meet with God on a weekly basis? How much time do you spend with him in his presence? Now, I'm not talking about church. At church, you're around other people. I'm talking about being alone with God. And I'm not talking about reading a devotional. That's good, but a devotional is somebody else's quiet time with God, not yours. Your time with God should inspire you to write your own devotional. Do you have a consistent time and place where you meet with God? Talk to him. Listen to him so you can write down what he says to you through the Holy Spirit. Now, if you had to rate your relationship with God from a 1 to a 10, 10 being the highest, based on time commitment, consistency, and meaningful communication with him, where would you rate it? Now, if your score is low in this area, don't be surprised if you're struggling or feel like you're in a spiritual rut. Personally, I meet with God at 5:30 a.m. every morning in my basement at the kitchen table, except for Saturdays. So that's 6 days a week, not counting church. Now, that's not me spiritually boasting. That's me being serious about my relationship with God. Now, to put this in context for you, I have a scheduled date day on Fridays with my wife once a week, but I have a scheduled date day with God 6 days a week. You always make time for what's most important to you. And the cool thing is that I'm not the only man who's getting results from his quiet time. I've literally taught hundreds of men, including my own family, how to have a quiet time with God. One of my coaching clients and a Real Men 300 member, Ray Pacheco, writes, I went from almost not spending any time at all with God to following Joe's instructions on how to have a consistent quiet time with God and how to get the most out of it. As a result, I've seen a dramatic difference in my relationship, not only with God, but also with my wife and my children and how I respond to them. I even respond to beautiful women differently. Thanks for teaching me. God's divine order commands that we spend consistent time in his presence. Matthew 6:33 says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. And all things include our marriage, our children, finances, our jobs, and other relationships. My wife loves that I spend so much time in God's presence because she and my children get to enjoy the fruit of it. And Jesus said in Matthew 22:36, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The point is, you show me a man who doesn't spend consistent time with Christ, and I'll show you a man whose life is either in a continuous crisis or is about to go into one. And not only does a man need to spend time with God, he needs to be taught and trained on how to spend time with God and be held accountable to it, at least until he goes from needing to wanting to spend time with God. And God expected our fathers to teach us how to do this. This is the first and most important area we need to strengthen if we want to win as men. And that's to learn how to have a consistent, effective, quiet time with God. Now, the next critical thing that every man needs if he wants to win as a godly husband, father, and spiritual leader is community. And what is community? Community is a team of godly men who know you. They know your struggles and they can relate to your struggles. When you're going through something, they're usually the first to say, man, I understand. Me too. Ecclesiastes 4:10-11 says, two are better than one because there's a better return on their labor. If one should fall, the other is there to help him up. But pity the man who falls down and doesn't have anyone there to help him get up. Remember when I said earlier that a man is only as strong as the number of stronger men he has in his life? I was referring to his team. Regardless of how strong I think I am, you can always lift more than me if you have more spotters helping you lift. So whenever I meet a man who's struggling, after asking him about his quiet time with God, I almost always ask him, do you even have a team? Who's on your team? Are they godly men? How long have you been meeting with them? And do you meet with them at least once a month, if not more? Just think about Jesus for a minute. He was the perfect man, yet he intentionally chose to surround himself with a community or a team of 12 men to share his life with, who weren't even the best men. They hung out together, they laughed, and they ate meals together, and they ministered together. And all of these men weren't perfect like Jesus. They all shared a common goal: to spread the gospel of the good news. A community or your team should always share a common goal, whether it be a godly man, to be sexually pure, to be a better financial steward, serve the poor, or even build something together. The specific goal doesn't matter as long as it's a shared goal. Otherwise, your team will be working against you instead of with you. That's what happened to Judas. His goal and his agenda for following Jesus changed. Within the Real Men 300, I created a team of men called Brothers Keepers. I facilitated this group for more than 5 years, and we've literally had hundreds of men join our community. But I want you to hear what Luke Wilson, a Real Men 300 member, had to say about being part of our team. Luke says, "I spent 11 years in federal prison because of my drug use and abuse. And like most men who spend a considerable amount of time in prison, after I got out, I found myself disassociating myself from other men. But after I met Joe, he introduced me to the Real Men 300 and has now become a vital part of my Christian walk and my faith. No matter how tough I thought I was and the kind of man I thought prison made me, I realized that I couldn't do life alone. I thank God daily for the impact that this ministry has made in my life." So when it comes to being in community, do you have a godly team on your sideline? Do you have a group of men who can understand your specific struggles as a man and can support you through those struggles? And how long have you been meeting with those men, and how often? If you show me a man who isn't part of a strong, godly community of men, I'll show you a man who's struggling just to survive and to keep his head above water. Now, the third critical thing that every man needs to succeed and win as a man is a personal connection with a smaller group of men who I like to call your teammates. Your teammates may be men from your team, but they're even closer to you than the rest of your team. Every man, whether he's a Christian or not, needs connection with a small inner circle group of men, usually 3 to 5, that he can walk with and do life together with. Teammates are a special group of men in your life who love you unconditionally. These are the men who love you the most when you deserve it the least. Even when you're at your worst, that's when they love you the best. These are the men with whom you can share your deepest secrets and struggles with no fear of rejection. These men won't ever judge you or lose respect for you, regardless of what you do and how often you do it. Even if you went to jail, they'd get you out before they chewed you out. I call these men foxhole friends, or go-to guys, ride or die dudes, or I got your back brothers. Just think about sports. Tom Brady and LeBron James are both part of teams. However, only a few guys are allowed in their huddle. I'm sure Tom Brady spends a little bit more time with his offensive linemen than he does with the defensive linemen. And I'm sure LeBron James spends more time off the court with the starters than he does with the bench warmers. Your teammates are those guys you trust, depend on, who you know will never leave your side. They will stick, stand, and stay, even if your wife doesn't. And Jesus had a team of 12 disciples, but he also had an inner circle of 3 men, Peter, James, and John. And Jesus spent more time with those 3 men than the other disciples. And they got to experience and witness things with Jesus that the others didn't. I've been fortunate to have some incredible teammates in my life, at least 25 or more, including 2 groups of 5 who I see on a weekly basis through the Real Men 300. And both groups have helped me to grow in my walk with God, in my relationship with my wife and children, and even in my ministry. But don't just take my word for it. Listen to what one of my teammates and Real Men 300 members, Chris Long, had to say about being in the foxhole with us. Chris says, "Being part of a small group of warriors and the accountability and genuine brotherhood that's developed out of it has been crucial in helping me recover from my addictions. Our discussions of real life issues without judgment or shame has opened my heart to perspectives that I wasn't gaining on my own. I have forged friendships and bonds with these men that will last me a lifetime because we are pushing forward towards a common cause, which is to storm the gates of hell together daily." So, do you have an inner circle of godly men like that? How many do you have? And how often do you meet with them? If they're legitimate teammates, that means you either see them or communicate with them at least once a week. How many men in your life would qualify as a teammate? And if you show me a man who doesn't have close teammates, I'll show you a man who's suffering in silence and in seclusion. Almost every Christian man is familiar with Proverbs 27:17 that says, "As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another." But most aren't familiar with Proverbs 18:1 that says, "Whoever isolates himself from others seeks his own desire. He breaks out and quarrels against all sound judgment." Now, the fourth critical component of winning as a man and being a champion Christian is having a coach. Now, I know the term coach is a foreign term to most of us as Christians, but as sports fans, we should be very familiar with this term. And believe it or not, it's biblical. All a coach is a godly man or a Paul type who is willing to train, disciple, and mentor you. This is a wiser, more experienced man who you respect and look up to as a husband, father, and spiritual leader. Think about it. Peter, James, and John had Jesus. Timothy had Paul. Elisha had Elijah. David had Samuel, and Solomon had David. Every man needs a coach, but not every man has one or knows how to find one. And how important is it to have a coach? Well, think about it this way. Tom Brady, LeBron James, Tiger Woods, and Derek Jeter are not only great male athletes, they're all champions. But guess what else they all have in common? They all had coaches. In fact, no champion has ever won a championship in anything without a coach. Now think about that for a second. No champion in history. Michael Jordan, who's arguably the greatest basketball player who ever played the game, still had a coach, Phil Jackson. Anytime a man tells me he has a desire to be a godly man, a great husband, a good father, or a strong leader, in other words, he wants to be a Christian champion, the next question I ask him is, who's your coach? And if he says, I don't have one, then I know he's either one of three things: in denial, deceived, or naive. Even the great Olympic champion Michael Phelps, who participates in the individual sport, had a coach, because it's impossible to succeed without one. Yet so many men continuously try and they end up consistently frustrated. Personally, I have 6 coaches I lean on and depend on for wisdom: 3 spiritual coaches and 3 personal coaches in the area of ministry, health, and finances. Here's what one of my clients and Real Men 300 member Wayne Carter had to say about getting personally coached for the first time. As I reflect back to my coaching sessions with Dr. Joe Martin, I can honestly say I've gone through a spiritual transformation. More importantly, those closest to me also attest to a noticeable change in my walk with Christ. I understand for some men, the idea of a Christian coach may seem foreign. And to be honest, at first I wasn't even sure myself. But looking back now, I have no doubt God moved my heart to contact Joe. And I'm so glad I did. So I'm asking you, take a look at your life. Are you where you want to be spiritually, physically, financially, relationally, professionally, even personally? And do you know someone who's where you like to be in those areas? If so, then why aren't you asking them to coach you? Yes, there's a strategy and method to finding, recruiting, and keeping coaches, or what people call mentors. But it took me over 20 years to find my 6. But if you know how to do it, the process doesn't have to be as difficult as most men make it out to be. You can't be as spiritually strong as God wants you to be without being spiritually coached. Jesus calls this being discipled. Every man needs a mentor, and every man needs to be a mentor. That was God's plan for man. So do you have a more experienced, wiser, godly man coaching you through life's challenges? And do you meet with him at least once a month? And finally, the last critical thing that every man needs to succeed and win as a Christian man is counseling. Now, it's the one thing that every man needs, but no man wants unless he's court-ordered. And what a shame. The reason why most men cringe when they hear the C word is because of the negative connotation that comes with it. When men usually hear the word counseling, they subconsciously hear another C word: crazy. And guess what? That's crazy. When I hear the word counseling, I don't hear crazy. I hear another C word: common sense. See, it takes common sense to seek help before you need it, rather than after you need it. Counseling isn't for crazy men. It's for courageous men who have the common sense to seek to understand themselves better by getting to the root causes of their current struggles. Someone once said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Ain't that the truth? Think about it this way. Would you wait 25,000 miles before you got an oil change for your car? Of course not, because by then it could be too late. You'd burn out the engine. You don't want to wait until your car breaks down before you get repairs if you can prevent it. That's why counseling is so important to men. It's a maintenance check on your spiritual vehicle, your soul. At least once a year, just like a physical, you need a mechanic to look under your relational hood. Check your air pressure, your warning lights, your brakes, and anything you might need to be aware of before you break down. Now, that's not crazy. That's just common sense. Someone asked me, Joe, why do you see a counselor once or twice a year if your marriage isn't in trouble? And I tell them because it's a lot cheaper and quicker than seeing one 3 to 5 times a week. Again, this is common sense. Jesus told his disciples that he must leave, but he would not leave them alone. He said he would send them a helper, the Holy Spirit, who will be their counselor, their comforter, and their guide, leading them in all truth. And just like the Holy Spirit is our spiritual counselor, a Christian counselor can serve as an emotional one. So the question I ask men who are struggling in their relationships, especially if they have a history in their family of anger, abuse, abandonment, addiction, or rejection is, when was the last time you got counseling? And if he tells me never or more than 3 years ago, then I become very concerned. Not just for him, but for the people he loves. Just because you don't see smoke coming from the engine of your car doesn't mean it's not going to break down on you. And more than likely, it's going to happen at the most inconvenient and stressful time of your life, and you can't afford that. So there you have it. The 5 critical things every man needs in order to win as a husband, father, spiritual leader, and as a Christian. A man who's spiritually weak is more than likely weak in one or more of those 5 areas. And a man who's spiritually strong is strong in at least 4 of those 5 areas. But now can you see why this is true? But I have some good news and I have some bad news for you. Now the bad news is approximately 78% of men, that's almost 8 out of 10, who took our spiritual man checkup, which scored them in all 5 of these areas, scored average to below average on this assessment, which means they're either suffering or they're surviving as a man. And some of these men are Christian men who have been following Jesus for years. But here's the good news. I decided to do something about it to help these men because I used to be there too. We have a coaching, discipling, and mentoring program called the Real Men 300 that we created to help strengthen and support men in all 5 of these key areas. And I truly believe it can help you, especially when it comes to winning in your marriage, with your finances, in raising children, at work, with sexual purity, finding and pursuing your purpose, and walking with God. And depending on the membership level you choose, we can either help you through one-on-one coaching with me every week or through group coaching with a team of godly men on a monthly basis. Together, we will be your team, and you'll even get to pick your own teammates from our team. It is no coincidence that when men ask me how I've been able to stay porn-free, masturbation-free, and lust-free for 13 and a half years, that it coincides with me having a consistent quiet time with God for the past 13 years. And that I've been consistently in a community of men, over 250 of them, for the past 13 and a half years. Also that I have at least 25 foxhole friends who are in my huddle, including 2 groups of 5 who I meet and connect with on a weekly basis. It is no coincidence that I've been sober for more than 13 and a half years, and I have 6 coaches who I go to for wisdom whenever I get spiritually stuck or I'm emotionally struggling. And that I meet with a counselor at least once, if not twice a year. Now with that type of support and that level of accountability, even when I do struggle, I can't stay stuck for long. I want every man, including you, to have that kind of support and accountability. I'm hard pressed to think of any man who doesn't need this type of support. But the truth of the matter is, most men want things in their life to change, but they're not willing to do what it takes to change. To them, getting better is just a good idea. It's like wanting to lose weight, but they're not willing to exercise and eat right. Yes, they may want to, but they're not willing to, or they're not ready. It's at this point when men ask me about the Real Men 300, they say things like, Joe, I have a hard time trusting other men. You don't know my past, and if I tell other men about it, they might judge me, and I'm afraid of being judged. And I understand that, and that's why the Real Men 300 is a partner-supported program. Every man in the Real Men 300 is a financial supporter of our program, which means every man in the program has the same concern you have. That's why they joined. No one is allowed into the program unless they're willing to put some skin in the game. This isn't church. These men are vested in the group, and what is said in the 300 stays in the 300. And unlike church, we can dismiss members. But even with that concern out of the way, you might be asking, but Joe, I was part of a men's group before and it didn't help me much. What if I join the Real Men 300 and it doesn't help me? Now, my answer to you will actually be a question. Did the help you received before involve one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and spiritual counseling? Not just meeting together for a Bible study or a video series. Did your group include weekly or at least monthly accountability sessions? What about 24/7 access to spiritual support right in the palm of your hand and on your computer? What about a weekly interactive devotional where you actually get to respond back to the author? And if the answer is no, then you haven't been part of a team quite like this. The Real Men 300 is different. And if you're thinking, what if I don't have the time, Joe, to use any of the services and support the Real Men 300 offers? Then I would say, honestly, then you're probably not really ready to win and become a champion. See, a great book you never read can't help you. The awesome relationship you never try to build can't bless you. The state-of-the-art gym you never attend can't strengthen you. So likewise, with the Real Men 300, a powerful team you never utilize can't support you. The fact is, you don't have to take advantage of all the services we offer, but even using some of them could be a huge blessing to you. And if you're wondering about the cost of the program and whether or not you can afford it, first of all, the Real Men 300 membership isn't a cost. It's a tax-deductible donation that supports our ministry and enables us to provide you with all this support. Second, if you don't address the challenges and struggles you're currently facing by getting the coaching and support you need, how much do you think it's going to cost you when your situation gets worse? It's like my wife says, nothing's going to change until you change something. And likewise, it's hard to value something that didn't cost you anything. Ask yourself, how much would it be worth to you for me and a team of 300 plus men to help you grow closer in your walk with God? Spiritually lead your wife and family and strengthen your marriage. Succeed at work and in business. Manage your time, money, and life better, and successfully and effectively handle the trials and temptations of life right now. What value would you put on that? Professional counselors typically charge $90 to $150 an hour. By supporting our ministry, we're offering you 24/7 spiritual support for only $1 to $3 a day, and it's tax deductible. Now you tell me, can you afford not to get this kind of help? And probably the most common question I get, Joe, what if I'm already part of a men's ministry at my church? Isn't that enough? Do I really need to be part of the Real Men 300? Now, if you're already part of a men's ministry at your church, I think that's fantastic. We're not trying to replace your men's ministry at your church or even ask you to leave it. We're offering to come alongside your ministry by filling in the gaps most men and Bible groups miss, like providing you with real accountability, one-on-one coaching, group coaching, 365 days of continuous support, weekly communication, online courses and leadership training, access to weekly interviews with other men, ministry on your phone and on your computer, tackling taboo issues most churches avoid. So let me ask you, what if you had someone in your life to teach you how to have a consistent quiet time with God and hold you accountable to it? What if you had a group of godly men you met with on a monthly basis or talked to on a daily basis online who can understand your struggles? What if you had 3 to 5 godly men in your life who could love you the best when you're at your worst, who you could share your secrets and struggles with and they not lose respect for you? And what if you had 1 to 3 spiritually wise, more experienced men in your life to coach and mentor you, whether one-on-one or in a group? Do you think you could be successful as a man? Of course you could. We all could. So the question is, what's next? I've learned from working with men that when it comes to change, there are 3 types of men. One is who I call the willing and ready guy. This is the guy who's been looking and waiting for something like this. He sees the value and he's caught the vision and he's ready to get started. If this is you, that means you're serious and you were probably ready to join the 300 within the first 5 minutes of this presentation. So all you have to do is go to realmen300.com and click on the level you want to join, either as a gold member or as a bronze member, and I'll see you soon. The second type of guy is the not willing and not ready guy. Now, he wants to change, but he's not willing to do what it takes to change. His present reality isn't bad enough yet. He still believes he has time to change later, so he'll walk away for now until either his situation gets worse or the pain of staying the same becomes unbearable. Now, trust me, I've been there before. Now, if that's you, I want you to know the Real Men 300 is here for you when you're ready to get serious, as long as we have space available. And then there's the third guy who's willing and almost ready. Now, this presentation has stirred your heart, but you've tried so many times in the past to change, but to no avail. But you know in your heart that this makes sense and there's something different about this. So you're ready to try something new, but you still have some questions. And if that's you, I understand. That's why I'd like to talk to you personally. Just use the link below to set up a free 15-minute breakthrough call with me, and I'll answer any questions you have about the Real Men 300. However, time slots are on a first come, first served basis. And whichever guy you are, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to watch this presentation. And if you choose to join us, I can't wait for you to get started so I can start communicating with you on a regular basis, and also for you to meet the other men in our community. And remember, you're only as strong as the number of stronger men on your team. And no good man can become a great man without the help of a godly man. Hopefully, I'll see you in the 300 or talk to you by phone very soon. And as I always say, you're a male by birth, but you're a man by choice. So choose to be the man God called and created you to be, because a male is a terrible thing to waste. And as always, stay strong, be blessed, and stay in God's grip.